This is 20 Minutes of Impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast, sponsored by Schneider Electric. I'm Herman K. Trabisch. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the podcast, recorded live at Schneider Electric's 2025 Innovation Summit, we're going to talk with Jeff Smith, Senior Vice President of Testing, Inspection, and Certification for UL Solutions, the global certifier of product standards, formerly known as Underwriters Laboratories. Jeff's going to describe UL's new Eco-Logo program to certify sustainable energy and industrial automation equipment. Jeff became Senior Vice President of Testing, Inspection, and Certification at UL in January 2021, after almost 2 decades in executive and management positions with the company. So Jeff, UL Solutions has a new Eco-Logo certification program for energy and automation equipment. What other products does UL provide this particular certification to, and why do they do that? And why was there a need for this new UL certification program for energy and automation equipment?
Yeah, thank you, Herman. First of all, it's a privilege to be with you today. Appreciate the opportunity. So UL Solutions mission really focuses on, first and foremost, safety. So we're well known for fire and electrical safety, going all the way back to 1894 when we were founded by the insurance industry to help society avoid bad outcomes with technology as it comes to market. And in recent times, we've recognized that in addition to safety, consumers care quite a lot about security. So that's another area we're focusing in on: cybersecurity, information security, and the topic today, sustainability. Increasingly, consumers want to understand how products are manufactured, where their raw materials are sourced from, how environmentally friendly are the products during their useful life, and what happens at end of life. So all of those things are comprised with the Eco-Logo certification that we're talking about today. UL Solutions has participated in the Eco-Logo program, led that program now for many years, but it's, to your question, been primarily focused more on retail and consumer products. That's where there's quite a few different regulations around retail and consumer products, apparel, and so on. The reason we're expanding now into industrial products like, in this case, circuit breakers, right? Most people don't think too much about circuit breakers. Right. They're in the basement of your house or building, and you only think about them if the power goes off. But I really have to credit Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric has always been a very thought-forward company around sustainability, and their commitment to that is unwavering. Everything, even I believe their corporate colors, exemplifies that. And so Schneider Electric really approached us and said, UL Solutions, you guys are in the sustainability space. We feel very confident about our ability to demonstrate good corporate citizenship. Could we work together to develop requirements for circuit breakers and other power distribution equipment? And so actually the Eco-Logo business, I lead our industrial group. We have a consumer group that's more focused on those retail and consumer products. We said, all right, well, let's give them a call. And so we brought our consumer team together with our industrial team, developed the requirements, and then Schneider has been the first company to go through the certification process.
Okay, interesting. So I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that it's a lot more difficult to certify the product like circuit breakers than it is to certify T-shirts or sneakers or something like that. There's a lot more equipment, probably a bigger supply chain. I'm not really sure. But I want to get really wonky on this because people have an opportunity in this conversation to really understand what it means to be certified with the Eco-Logo. So how does a company like Schneider Electric that manufactures energy and industrial automation equipment qualify? How do they qualify for it? What's the process? Do they take a circuit breaker and ship it to you and just wait? Is that the and then the other part of the question really is, how do you handle it? What's the process of testing that ensures that the equipment really is meets the standard that you impose? And by the way, I guess it's worth knowing, what is the standard?
Right.
So let's dig in there.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to be clear about, because there are different environmental standards that people, or sustainability standards people apply for. Sometimes they're at an enterprise level. This particular eco-logo program is really product specific, and that's what makes it a nice complement with our safety standards and certification, because that's the way we usually work with our customers like Schneider Electric, is hands-on, looking at the product, looking at the bill of materials, understanding more, traditionally from a safety context. Safety is really additive along the supply chain. So we look at everything from the plastics that are being used to house electrical parts, to make sure there's flammability properties there, so that temperatures and fire and shock are handled. And then the end product itself is what bears the UL certification mark. So that's the safety side. But it's a very natural fit with also looking into sustainability, because as it turns out, in order to really verify the sustainable footprint of a product, you need to trace back through all of the raw materials that go into the bill of materials, where they're sourced from, and ultimately at the end of life, how that product is decomposed and recycled.
So is it at both ends? In other words, do you look at, were these products minerals in wiring, for instance, were they procured from mines that employ children? And at the other end, do you look at, can these wires be recycled, or are they going to be in landfills for centuries? Is that the kind of thing?
That's the type of thing. In this particular case, I think we're stopping short of perhaps conflict minerals and some of those things. This is very focused on environmental impact.
Oh, so is it harming the environment to
That's
mine
right,
it?
from a sustainability standpoint. So if we come back around to look, well, what is the standard and how is it established? So this standard in this case is UL 2711.
Okay.
And I want to share that with all of the other companies we work with in the industry, because
you got to know the number.
We got to give Schneider credit for being the tip of the spear and saying we're going to get this going, but we aspire to offer this program to many other manufacturers who are undoubtedly listening to your podcast. And so it's the standard for sustainability of energy and industrial automation equipment, and it covers the design, material selection, manufacturing, packaging, product use, extension of useful life, end-of-life management, and the corporate practices around all of that.
Interesting.
So this is more, while it isn't a company certification, it is more comprehensive than safety certification, mainly because safety certification, we can do physical tests, and we could look at construction, and the standards are very clear about that. Here, if you want to evaluate sustainable practices, you do have to look at also at the corporate practices and processes around that whole life cycle of
That's a more complicated process. First of all, how long does this whole thing take? And then it sounds like you must have researchers as well as laboratory testers. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, so we have experts, and again, the group right now is in our retail team, because a lot of retailers have very strict requirements, sometimes in order to comply with regulations. But in many cases, the leading retailers they want their consumers to be confident that the products they're buying have gone through this rigor of testing. Most of this is voluntary still. We're not in a regulatory environment that compels companies to do this. And in terms of the time it takes, so in this case, when the team first came to me with Schneider's request, I want to say this was in mid to late 2023, and it took until now, but that's just because the standard didn't exist. And this was a first of its kind in industrial products. So, it took us some time to gear up, and I want to give Schneider credit. They were very persistent. They said, hey, we want to do this. You guys have a great program with EcoLogo. And, it was always on our agenda when we would talk about other topics. I would say the evaluation itself, though, can be done in a matter of a couple of months. A lot of it really is records review. It's like, show us evidence. So we don't have to do a lot of testing. We're not independently validating every aspect of sustainability. But there is a certain amount of testing that's being done around the chemical footprint, if you will, of the components that go into these. But because we were able to do a lot of records reviews with the clients, it doesn't have to take a tremendous amount of time.
Interesting. Okay, well, now let's talk a little bit about where this is all going. So Schneider was the first company to apply for this EcoLoco certification. And as you say, it started with its circuit breaker portfolio. it'd be interesting to know why circuit breakers first, but it would also be interesting to know what other products could a company like Schneider Electric, a manufacturing company, doesn't have to be Schneider Electric, you guys serve practically everybody in every industry. What other products, how much, in other words, the real question ultimately where we're going is how much impact is this going to mean in terms of a cleaner, healthier world?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, Herman, this still is in the realm of voluntary. So what I've learned with UL in my over 2 decades here is we play an important role as a convener to bring manufacturers and interested parties, non-government organizations, even sometimes, the government representatives, we call authorities having jurisdiction who have oversight over permitting and other practices. We bring everyone together and say, we are an independent science-based company. And so, we have, for example, in the safety part of the business, we have over 3,000 degreed engineers on staff who are experts in safety of all these different electrical products, building materials, so fire, electrical, and other properties. Coming back to the question around eco-logo and industrial products, I can't really predict how quickly this is going to develop. I think most of the leading brands in this space care quite a bit about sustainability. They all put out impact reports. So I'm actually quite optimistic that this will be a way for, we know that there's been a lot of greenwashing in the space, and I think the reputable companies are very mindful of that and are looking for programs that cut through that and say, no, this is, and we believe Eco-Logo is one of the leading certification programs, not just in North America, but on the planet, really, where, and because of who we are and our, I would say, inflexible commitment to being independent
Absolutely,
and technical,
yeah.
we think that we can help industry demonstrate over time their sustainable practices. Now, we know that regulatory environments change as, in democracies, as administrations change. But when you really look at particularly the younger generations, there's a real desire over time to see that we are doing things in a much more responsible way for people, planet, and so on. Now, the infrastructure itself, how much of an impact can this have? I don't have any data, so I'm not sure. But what happens with these products is, there's a lot of ingredients that go into them. Why Schneider Electric chose this particular power-packed molded case circuit breaker, I'm not sure. But I can tell you there's a lot of plastics and other materials that go, chemicals that go into the manufacturing of this. And these products have very long useful lives. They stay in field for decades. So I think for industrial manufacturers, they need to be thinking now about the long-term impact of the products they're producing, because they're going to be in use for a long time. And you're right, there are a lot of other technologies that could benefit from this. And so this is a great opportunity to put the word out about the program and see if we can get some more traction and convene more industry.
We're running a little short on time, and I want to ask a follow-up, but I want to leave time to get to the last question. So do you think this is something that wind turbine manufacturers, solar panel manufacturers, natural gas combined cycle turbine manufacturers could ultimately make use of? Is it that big? Transmission line developers, are all those things subject to this kind of scrutiny?
It certainly could be. I mean, I think the standards would need to continue to be updated because there are, specific considerations. You talk about wind turbine blades. Solar panels is a great, they tend to last for 30 years in the field, but then they will need to be recycled. And batteries is one I thought you might ask me about. We're doing a tremendous amount of testing on batteries. And there's a lot of, question around if we're all driving electric vehicles, what happens at the end of life of the batteries themselves. So I think Eco-Logo can be an important part of that. I think there's more, that others will have to do as well, but we feel at UL Solutions we have a role to play.
Interesting. Our listeners may be in on something right at the beginning that gets to be very, very big. Last question. I don't know how much time we have, maybe just briefly. This Innovation Summit, we're in our second day. What have you seen here or heard here that really excited you or interested you?
Yeah, so everybody, of course, right now is talking about data centers, AI factories, just a tremendous amount of energy and power, but also incredible capability. I think systems are going to be able to manage themselves so much more effectively with all of the AI horsepower that's coming online. There's a tremendous focus on codes. When I say codes, I mean like the National Electrical Code, the building codes, standards, safety standards, because we need to really update all of this very, very quickly. And what I've been so impressed with here is that obviously for Schneider Electric, meeting this new demand for power and energy for data centers is a huge business opportunity for them. But they've been very clear that in addition to achieving that growth, safety needs to be brought along. Sustainability continues to be a critical part of this. And so I just think that all of these things coming together and seeing Schneider's leadership position on this has been very impressive.
Yeah, it's very exciting to be at the beginning of this. I think that's a good place to leave it, Jeff. I want to thank my guest, Jeff Smith, Senior Vice President of Testing, Inspection, Certification for Global Standards Certifier UL Solutions, for describing a new UL Eco-Logo certification program for energy and automation equipment that could lead to really big, exciting advances in sustainability. I also want to thank our sponsor and host, Schneider Electric. And as always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.